Hello, in this video, I'm giving away the first couple of lectures of my how to make an action platformer in Unreal Engine 5. If you want the full course where we make things like a boss battle and much more, check out the link in the description. If you don't already, you're going to want to install Unreal Engine. You can do that by heading over to unrealengine.com and just clicking the download button here. This will take you to this page and you just want to download the Epic Game Launcher. Once you've downloaded the Epic Games Launcher, it'll look something like this. You want to head over to Library, and here under Engine Versions, you want to just add a new engine version, so you can click here, and select Unreal Engine version 5, and just install it. Once you've downloaded Unreal Engine, you should be able to select the version you want to use here. Make sure to select Unreal Engine version 5. Once you've downloaded Unreal Engine, head over to the Marketplace tab, and here under Search Products, look for PaperZD, no spaces. We're going to be using this PaperZD plugin to help us build our 2D game. Just head over and select this PaperZD. Then you want to click Install to Engine and install it to Unreal Engine version 5. We're now ready to create our project. If we click Launch, this will open up the Unreal project browser, and you just want to head over to the Games tab, and you want to select Blank. We're going to be creating a 2D game from complete scratch. Then under project name, just call this what you want to call your project. I'm going to call this the Action Platformer. And under project defaults, make sure that you select Blueprint. Then you can click Create. It should open up your Unreal Engine project and it should look something like this. Before we get started, we're just going to enable the plugin because we're going to be using it later when we make our game. To enable our plugin, simply head over to Edit and go Plugins. Then here we want to search for PaperZD, the plugin that we installed, and just check this little box. It will ask us if we want to restart our Unreal Engine editor. We need to just click Restart Now so it can restart with the plugin. Hello! The next thing we're going to do is set up a 2D character that we can play our game as. I want you to briefly close Unreal Engine, and attached in this course, I'm going to provide some assets that we're going to be using to make our game. I want you to download them. Open up your content drawer and make sure the content folder is selected. And find this folder called Individual Sprites and just select and drag it into your Unreal Engine project. This will import a bunch of sprites that we're going to be using when we set up our 2D character. So in our project, we're going to be referencing the content drawer quite a lot. So to save some time, I want us to go to Window and go Content Browser and just select Content Browser 1. And this will just make sure that our content browser is always there. If you don't want it there, then you can just delete it and press Control Space to quickly open up your content drawer, or just click it here. But I kind of like having it there, so I'm just going to add it. So go Window, Content Browser, and just select Content Browser 1 to make sure it's always there. Then, with all these images selected, to save time, just select them all. So I'm holding Shift and selecting the last image, right click on them and go Sprite Actions and apply PaperZD texture settings. This will just make it so that all the images that we imported are now clear. Sometimes if we import an image and don't use apply PaperZD texture settings, sometimes they can be a bit fuzzy. I want us to select the individual sprite folder, and I'm just going to right click and rename this to be our warrior animations. So we're going to be setting up a 2D character, and they're going to have many different animations. Although to start with, we're only going to give our character a couple of basic animations, and those are going to be an idle animation, a running animation, a jumping animation, a dashing animation, and a wall sliding animation. So I want you to head over to the idle animation folder. So this one is called idle. And I want you to select all the images and right click and go Sprite Actions and go Create Sprite. Now that we've created a sprite out of all these images, we can turn them into a flipbook which will kind of play an animation. So to do that, select the first sprite and then the last sprite. Then just right click on the first one and go Create Flipbook and just call this Warrior Idle. Now, if I double click and hit inside here, as we can see, it's put all those sprites together into this flipbook. So first, it's gonna play us our Warrior 1 sprite, then our Warrior 2 sprite, then our Warrior 3 one, then our Warrior 4 one, and so on. If you want to change how fast it plays this, we can go over to here, Sprite, where it says frames per second, and if I made this something like 1, then it's going to happen very slowly. If I made this something like 60, then it's going to be very, very fast. So you can just use that to adjust the speed of the flipbooks. I'm just going to make mine 8. I think that works pretty well. and we can just close this. Next, I want us to close this folder, and I want us to head over to the walking folder. Sorry, it's called running. So we just want to head over to the run folder, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to select all the images, right click, go sprite actions, and create sprite. Then I'll select all the sprites, right click, and go create flipbook. And we can just call this warrior run. Then I want us to head over to the dashing folder. We'll do the same thing. I'll select all the images, right click, sprite actions, create sprite. Then I will select all the sprites, right click, and create a flipbook. Then we will head over to the jumping folder. So this one, jump. I will select all the images, right click, sprite actions, and create sprite. Then I'll select all the sprites again and create a flipbook. So you should be getting pretty used to this now. We need to head over to the falling folder. Do the same thing. So we'll select all the images, right click, sprite actions, and create a sprite. And then we'll select all these sprites and create a flipbook. And then finally, we just need to head over to the wall sliding folder and select all these images, right click, sprite actions, and create sprite. And then we'll create a flipbook out of all these sprites. So now we have set up all the animations that our character is going to use in this first section. Hello! The next thing we're going to do is add some controls to our game. For example, we'll make it so that when the player presses spacebar, they'll jump inside of our game. In order to add controls inside of Unreal Engine, head over to Edit and go Project Settings, and scroll down and go to Input. In Unreal Engine, we can add controls in two ways. We can either add the control as an action mapping or an axis mapping. I'm going to go over what each of them do now. So we just go to Action Mapping and click Add New Action Mapping. And here, if I just call this Jump, then underneath here, we can assign the key that we want to assign to this action. So I'm going to look for spacebar. So what this will mean is when I press the spacebar button inside of my game, it will call the Jump Action Mapping. We can make it so that action mappings are configured to multiple buttons. So if I just go here and go Add, and under here, if I look for left control, we've made it so that when I press spacebar or left control, it will call the jump action mapping inside of my game. Now the way action mappings work is we can tell whether a button is pressed or released. So if my player is holding spacebar, with an action mapping we'll be able to tell when we are pressing the spacebar, and we'll be able to tell when we have let go of the spacebar. With an axis mapping, it will continuously read the input of a key we're pressing. So I'll showcase what I mean by this. If I go Add New Axis Mapping, and let's just call this Move Right. So when I want my player to move right, I want them to press the right button on their keyboard. So here, let's look for right. And as you can see, this has a value of 1. So if I press the right button on my keyboard, this will make this Move Right axis mapping have a value of 1. If I just add another axis mapping to this group and make it left, and I make the value of this -1, when I press the left button on my keyboard, this will make the Move Right have an axis mapping value of -1. And we're basically going to use this axis mapping to make our player character move towards the right when they press the right button, and move towards the left when they press the left button. When we set up the input in our player character, you'll see much more clearly how this all works. I just want to add another axis mapping and make it so when I press the D button, my player character will move towards the right, and when I press the A button, my character will move towards the left. So make sure that the left and A have a value of -1, and the right and D have a value of 1. We can close this. Now that we set up the controls for our game, the next thing we're going to do is set up a 2D character that we can play our game as. Inside of our content folder, let's create a new folder. If we right click and go New Folder, and just call this player character. Head inside this folder and just right click again and go to Blueprint Class and go to All Classes, and under Search, look for PaperZD. And we want to select this one, PaperZD Character, and just call this our player_BP. So inside of here, we're going to write all the information about how our player should behave and act inside of our game. So if we just double click and head inside here, the first thing we're going to do is go to our Components tab and go to our sprite. Here under our sprite, basically let us know how our player is going to look inside of our game. We're going to go to our details and then go to the sprite panel. And if you remember earlier, we made a bunch of flipbooks at the start. I want us to look for the idle flipbook and just select it. So we can currently see this looks quite small. So we need to make it a bit bigger so it fits inside of this capsule. So in order to do that, just select it and then under here, under scale, just make sure this little anchor is checked. And if I just increase the size of one of the values here to something like 3, because that anchor was checked, it will scale everything uniformly. If I just left this unchecked, I can scale this, but everything's not going to scale uniformly. So that's why I just leave it checked when I'm like scaling things. We can also scale things by just going here to the select and scale objects tool. This will change the 3D gizmo. And if I just select the middle one and make sure all the 3 ones are highlighted and just drag on my mouse, it'll become a bit bigger. So I'm just going to move my sprite so it fits inside my character's capsule. If you're not happy with the capsule collision, you can just select it, and we can adjust the values of them by changing the capsule half height and the capsule radius. For now, I'm just going to leave it as I think it looks kind of fun. So this is our player character. Right now, if I just imported them inside of our game, they wouldn't work. And that's because we need to make sure that our player character has a camera. So we just select our capsule component and go add and look for spring arm. This is what our camera is going to be attached to. We just want to select the spring arm and rotate it so it's facing our player character. With the spring arm selected, just go add and look for camera. And just rotate this camera so it's facing our player character. And if I just select the spring arm, we can adjust the target arm length to make it closer or further away from our player character. Next, before we add the controls to our player character, I just want them working inside of our level. So we just close this and head over to Window and go to World Settings. This will add this little tab here. And here it's going to ask us for our game mode. So our game mode basically tells the game what player character we should start our game as. So we're going to create a new game mode. So in order to do that, just right click, go Blueprint Class, and go Game Mode Base, and just call this our 2D game mode. Head inside here, and go to Default Pawn Class. So our player BP is a pawn blueprint. A pawn blueprint is any blueprint that can be possessed by a player character. We just want to go to our default pawn class and select the player BP. And just go compile and save. And now here under world settings, if I just drag in my 2D game mode here, when I start my game, I'm going to start as this player BP. In order to determine where in our world our player will start, we can just go here to add quickly things to the project and select basic and select player start. So our character is going to start here inside of our game. And now if I just go play, my game will load and this will be where my character starts. So nice, everything is working. The next thing we're going to do is add the controls that we set up earlier so that they work with our player character. Hello, next we're going to add some controls to our player blueprint. If we open it up, I actually think that I made the camera a bit too close to my player character. So I'm going to select the spring arm and make it have a value of 1000, just so it's a bit further back. Next, if we head over to the event graph, here is where we're going to write most of the code for how we control and how our player character will behave. What we're going to do is just right click and look for jump. So if you remember earlier, we made an action mapping jump. So it should be here, input, action events, jump. Just select it. And then just right click and look for move right. So earlier we made an input access event called move right. Just select it. So we'll make it so that when we press the jump button, our character will jump. And when we press the move right button, our character will move towards the right. And using this node, we'll also make it so our player character will move towards the left when we press the left button. So in order to make our character jump when we press the jump button, we can just drag up here and look for the jump node. And this will just automatically make our player character jump up in the air. When we release this button, you just want to drag off here and look for stop jumping. And this will make it so our character will stop jumping. Next, in order to make our player character move towards the right or the left, we can just drag up here and look for add movement input. So here under Y direction, we'll determine where our character will move. We're working with a 2D game, and if we just go to the viewport and I select my sprite, and I'm just going to go to select and translate objects, I'm just going to select this red arrow, and as you can see, the value will move in the x-axis. So in our 2D game, our player character is always going to be moving in the x-axis. Because of this, in our event graph, here under Y direction, we just want this to have a value of 1. Then here under scale value, just drag off this axis value and look for print string. Whoops. So just right click and break the link here and hook up axis value to here and axis value to here. So if you remember earlier, we made it so that when we press the right button or the D key, the axis value will be 1, and this will just make it so our character will move positively in the X direction. However, we made it so that when we press the left button or the A button, this axis value will be -1, and that will just make it so our character will move negatively in the X axis. So now we can just test that our controls work. So I'm going to go compile, close this, and go play. And if I press spacebar, my character will jump. If I press the right button, my character will move towards the right. If I press the left button, my character will move towards the left. I just want to go over a couple more settings that we can do with the jump. So if you wanted the player character to jump higher, what you could do is go to character movement, and under details, look for jump velocity, and it's here, jump Z velocity. If I made this something like 600 and go compile, when my player character jumps in the air, it'll jump a lot higher. And if you wanted the player character to have multiple jumps, so right now our character can only jump once and then they can't jump again. If you wanted to change that, you want to go to player BP, and here under jump, you want to change the max jump count. So I made this something like 2. Now my player character will be able to jump twice. And if you want to make it so that the longer I hold the spacebar button, the higher my player character is going to jump, we can do that with this handy little setting here. So if we go to our player BP, currently you can see jump max hold time. So I made this something like 1. I'm going to be able to hold my jump button for up to 1 second, and as long as I'm holding the spacebar button, my character will continuously move up. So I'll showcase what I mean. If I go play and I just tap the jump button, I'll just jump like that and then come back down. However, if I hold my spacebar button, it's going to hold that jump input. But if you don't want to have that dynamic jump, then you can just set the jump max count to be a value of 0. That's why we have this stop jumping. If you have the jump max hold time above 0, then you need to ensure that you have the stop jumping node. If you just leave it at 0, you don't really need the stop jumping node, but we'll just leave it there. So, you may have noticed, when my player character moves towards the right, they're facing the correct direction. However, if my player character moves towards the left, they're not facing the correct direction, and it looks kind of weird. So let's fix that now. If I head over to my player BP, we're going to go over to our input axis move right, and we can just delete this print string. The first thing we're going to do is create a new variable. So we just go to create a new variable and call this move right question mark, and just compile it. I'm just going to drag in this move right variable and look for set move right. So this is a Boolean variable. Boolean variables can be either true or false, and we're basically going to use this variable to help us determine whether our player character should be moving towards the right or left. So what we're going to do is just drag off this axis value and check to see if it is greater than 0. If this is greater than 0, we'll just drag off here and look for branch. If that is true, then we're going to set our move right to be true. So we can just hook up all these nodes. However, if our axis value is not greater than 0, then we are going to do another check. So we'll drag off axis value and check to see if this is less than 0. So I'll just drag off here and look for branch and hook up false into here. So if our axis value is less than 0, and that is true, then we're going to drag in our move right and just set it so it's untrue. And we'll just hook up false into here. So what we've done is, if our axis value is ever greater than 0, we'll set this variable called moveRight to be true. However, if our axis value is ever less than 0, then we'll set this variable to be false. Next, we're going to go up and look for event tick. So the way event tick works is every single frame is going to run this node. And on event tick, we're going to make sure that our character is always facing the correct direction. So off event tick, we first want to drag in our character movement. And off here, we're going to look for velocity. And we're going to get the velocity of our character. We just want to right click on this value and click split structure pin. We're only going to be concerned with the velocity of our character in the x-axis because, as I mentioned earlier, in our 2D game, our character is only going to be moving in the x-axis. And what we're going to do is event tick, we're going to drag off here and look for compare float. Now we're going to compare the velocity of our character in the x-axis with the value 0. If our character's velocity in the x-axis is ever greater than 0, that means our player character should be facing towards the right. So in order to make that happen, what we can do is just right click and look for get controller. This will get the controller that we're controlling the player character as. And what we want to do is just drag off here and look for is valid. This will just make sure that we have a valid reference to our controller. And if that is valid, then we're going to set the rotation of our player character to be facing towards the right. We can do that by dragging off this node and looking for set control rotation. Then under this new rotation value, we can just drag off here and look for make rotator. And we can write the values that we want our character to have in the X, Y, and Z. If I head over to the viewport and just select my sprite, currently we can see my sprite's rotation in the X, Y, and Z is 0, and my player character is facing the right. So here in my event graph, I'm just going to leave this value at 0, 0, 0. If my player character's velocity in the x-axis is ever less than 0, that means my player character is moving towards the left, and we want our player character to be facing the left. So I'm going to copy all these nodes, press Ctrl C, and then Ctrl V, and hook up from this node, the less than, to here. If I go back to my viewport and just select my sprite, in the Z, if I make this value 180, my sprite will flip and they'll be facing towards the left. I'm just going to put this back at 0 and head over to my event graph. So when my character's velocity in the x-axis is less than 0, we'll make it so my character is facing towards the left. So here under Z, we want to put a value of 180. And if my player character's velocity in the x-axis is ever equal to 0, then what we're going to do is drag in this moveRight variable, which will be determined by here. And just drag off here and look for branch. If the moveRight variable is true, then we'll make it so our player character is facing towards the right. And if our moveRight variable is false, we'll make it so our player character is facing towards the left. And we'll just hook up from here to here and just go compile and save. So if I just close this and go play, if I move towards the right, my character moves towards the right. If I move towards the left, whoops, so that's not working. If we head back to our player character, we just want to select our spring arm, and currently its rotation is set to relative. We need to change it so that it's set to the world. And go compile, save, close this, and now if I go play, when I press the right mouse button, when I press the right key button, my character will move towards the right. If I press the left key button, my character will move towards the left. Now normally in 2D platformer games, our character starts facing the right by default. So under my player BP, just make sure the moveRight variable is just checked, so our character will start the game facing towards the right. So if I go play, my character starts facing towards the right, and I can move around and jump. The next thing I want to do is use the PaperZD animation system to make it so our character will play some different animations when they're jumping and moving. Hello! The next thing we're going to do is set up the animations for our player character. If we just right click and create a new folder and just call this animations and head inside here. Then right click and go to PaperZD and go to animation source. Just call this our warrior animation source. Just double click and open it up. So this is part of the plugin that we installed. This animation source, we're going to basically use this to store all the animations that we want associated with our 2D player character. Go to Asset Browser and go Add New, then select New Animation Sequence. Right click on this animation sequence and just call this Run. Then under Animation Data, select the Run Flipbook. Then click Add New Animation Sequence. Call this one Idle and select the Idle Flipbook. We're going to add some more animations later, but for now, these are all the animations that we need. Click Save and close this. Then right click and go PaperZD and select a PaperZD animation blueprint. It's going to ask us what animation source we want to use. Just select the Warrior animation source that we just made and just call this our Warrior ZD animation blueprint. And double click and open it up. If you're familiar with Unreal Engine's normal animation blueprints for 3D characters, this is kind of similar, although it's for 2D characters. If you're not, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything I do as I go along. So, currently we're going to start off in the event graph, and there are going to be two nodes, event tick and event on int. So this event on int will run as soon as the game starts. So event on int, we're going to create a reference to our player BP. In order to do this, just right click and look for get owning actor. So this one, PaperZD get owning actor. And this will be able to get a reference to the player character that we're playing as. Just drag off here and look for cast to player BP. And hook this into here. Just right click on this player BP and promote it to a variable. This will allow us to reference our player character later on. Next, I want you to head over to the animation graph and drag in the as paper BP. Drag off here and look for get velocity. And I want you to just drag up here and look for break vector and just drag off the X and look for not equal. So if my player character's velocity in the X-axis is not equal to 0, we're going to make it so our player character will play a certain animation. So just drag off here and look for blend. This one, select animations by ball and hook up animation to here. So if our character's velocity is not equal to 0, then we're going to play the running animation, as that means our player character is running. So we're going to just right click and look for play run. And we're referencing the run that we made in this animation source. And we can hook this up here. And under false, we can just drag off here and look for play. And we can just go compile. Then if we head over to our player BP, in order to make it use this Warrior ZD animation blueprint, just select this animation component. And here under anim instant class, select the Warrior ZD animation blueprint. And just go compile. And we can just close this and go play. And if I move, so my character's velocity is greater than 0 in the x-axis, my character will do their running animation. So with this, we have set up a running animation for our character. If I just stand still and my velocity is equal to 0, then I'll do my idle animation. So nice. With this, we set up some basic animations for our player character.